The crystal chandelier in the sterling dining room, a glittering cascade of 1,000 captured stars, usually cast a warm, golden glow. Tonight, however, its light felt cold, harsh, illuminating every tense line on my father's face, every tremor in my mother's hand as she reached for her water glass. I was Chloe, a privileged 23-year-old, and my world, usually a seamless tapestry of exclusive parties, designer labels, and the comfortable assumption of future power, was about to shatter. My life had always been orchestrated, impeccable. From my boarding school education to my carefully curated social circle, every detail seemed preordained. I was the heiress presumptive to Sterling Enterprises, my family's vast conglomerate, a name synonymous with power, innovation, and old money. My father, Richard Sterling, the stoic CEO, was a titan in the industry, his reputation as unyielding as the skyscrapers he built. My mother, Eleanor, the elegant matriarch, moved through high society with a grace that belied her sharp intellect, a silent partner in the empire. They were the unshakable foundation of my existence, a symbol of stability and success. We were gathered for our weekly Sunday dinner, a ritual of quiet formality. The gleaming mahogany table, laden with untouched gourmet food, usually fostered polite conversation about market trends or upcoming charity galas. Tonight, an unsettling silence hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. My father, typically engrossed in his phone, sat unusually still, his eyes fixed on my mother. My mother, usually so composed, kept her gaze on her plate, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her crystal glass. A cold dread, a premonition of disaster began to coil in my stomach. Finally, my father cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence. He spoke, his voice measured, devoid of warmth, like a pronouncement from a marble statue. "Eleanor, Chloe, I have an announcement to make." My mother flinched, a subtle tightening of her shoulders. My heart pounded against my ribs. This wasn't about a new merger. This felt personal. "Your mother and I," he continued, his gaze sweeping over us with detached precision, "are getting a divorce." The words hung in the air, shattering the fragile peace. Divorce. It was a concept for other families, for tabloids, not for the Sterlings. We were carved from granite, impenetrable. My mother, the epitome of grace under pressure, finally lifted her head. Her eyes, usually sparkling with wit, were wide with a raw, undeniable pain. "Richard, how could you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. My father ignored her, his eyes now fixed on me. "This decision has been carefully considered," he said, his tone chillingly devoid of emotion. "It is necessary for the future of the Sterling legacy. As you know, Eleanor has been unable to produce a male heir." My breath hitched. A male heir? What was he talking about? I was his heir. I was being groomed for the company. The unspoken agreement, the comfortable assumption of my future power evaporated in a puff of smoke. Then came the truly devastating blow. I will be marrying Isabel. The name hit me like a physical punch. Isabel, my best friend, my confidant, my constant companion since our prep school days. The girl I had shared secrets with, the girl who had been at my side through every triumph and every heartbreak. Isabel. A dizzying wave of nausea swept over me. I tried to speak, but my throat was suddenly dry, constricted. My eyes darted to my mother, whose face was now contorted in a silent scream, a mix of fury and despair battling for dominance. Just as the shock threatened to overwhelm me, the dining room door swung open. A figure stood silhouetted against the bright hallway light. It was Isabel. She sauntered in, not tentatively, but with a deliberate, almost theatrical slowness, and then I saw it. The gentle swell beneath her silk dress. She was heavily pregnant, my father's child. His male heir, I realized with a sickening lurch. Isabel's eyes, usually warm and conspiratorial, now gleamed with a cold, malicious satisfaction. As she met my shocked gaze, a slow, triumphant smile spread across her lips. It was a smile of utter victory, of long-planned, perfectly executed betrayal. It wasn't just a divorce, it was a coup. My father, oblivious to the silent communication of female treachery playing out before him, continued his cold pronouncement. Given this new development and the future of the Sterling line, there will be some necessary changes. His eyes, cold and flinty, swept over my mother, then over me, lingering with a contempt that made my skin crawl. Eleanor, effective immediately, you are to vacate the premises. All your accounts and privileges associated with Sterling Enterprises will be revoked. You will receive a modest settlement as per the prenuptial agreement, but you are no longer part of this family nor this company. My mother gasped, a broken sound that tore at my heart. Her eyes, once filled with the dignity of a corporate heiress, now blazed with a desperate, wounded fury. Eleanor, a woman who came from a lineage as powerful as Richard's, a woman who had married beneath her for love, giving up her own corporate aspirations to support his rise, was now being cast out like a discarded relic. She had given him everything, paved his way to success, endured his coldness, and now, in her elder years, she was being discarded for her inability to produce a son. Then his gaze, sharp as a surgeon's scalpel, landed on me. "As for you, Chloe," he said, his voice flat, "your position within Sterling Enterprises is terminated. Your access to company funds and resources will be cut off. You are no longer considered an heir. This house is no longer your home." My world didn't just shatter, it imploded. Everything I had ever known, every assumption, every privilege, every future plan, disintegrated into dust. I looked at my father, the man I had revered, the man who had taught me about power and strategy. His face was devoid of remorse, his eyes glittering with a triumphant smirk. He was proud of this, proud of his brutal efficiency, proud of securing his legacy at our expense. And then I looked at Isabel, my best friend, standing there, swollen with my father's child, her face radiating smug, self-satisfied victory. The image of her malicious smile, her pregnant belly, my father's cold dismissal, and my mother's broken face burned into my mind. "Get out," my father stated, his voice a low, final growl. "Both of you. Now." My mother, her face etched with a pain so profound it stole her breath, slowly rose from her chair. I mirrored her movement, my legs feeling like lead. Together, 2 women cast out, we stood, facing the man who had built his empire on our backs, and the best friend who had conspired in our downfall. As we were ushered out by a grim-faced security guard, leaving behind the opulent dining room and the ruins of our lives, a chilling resolve began to harden within me. The shock, the hurt, the sheer unimaginable betrayal, it all coalesced into a cold, burning fury. My mother, the refined heiress who had sacrificed her own empire for love, was now being treated like this in her twilight years, and I, her supposed successor, was deemed expendable. Richard Sterling thought he had won. Isabel thought she had secured her future. They thought they had left us with nothing, but they had underestimated one crucial thing: the fury of a woman scorned and the unbreakable bond of a mother and daughter pushed to the brink. They thought they had stripped us of everything. They were wrong. They had merely ignited a fire, a rage that would consume them. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning of the real battle for Sterling Enterprises, and they wouldn't see it coming. The cold New York night air was a shock against my tear-streaked face as we were unceremoniously ushered out of the Sterling mansion. My mother, Eleanor, clutched my arm, her elegant composure shattered, her breath coming in ragged gasps. I looked back at the grand, imposing facade of the house, bathed in the glow of security lights, and a chilling resolve hardened within me. Richard thought he had cast us out into the darkness. He was wrong. He had simply handed me a match. My mother, a woman who had given up her own corporate ambitions to support his, now leaned against me, utterly devastated. I saw her trembling hands, her ravaged face, and the last vestiges of my privileged, naive self burned away, replaced by a cold, searing fury. This wasn't just about us. It was about the callous disregard for a lifetime of sacrifice, the brutal contempt for a woman's worth beyond her ability to bear a male heir. We ended up in a small, discreet hotel suite downtown, paid for by one of Mother's old, fiercely loyal personal accounts, the few that hadn't been immediately frozen by Richard. The next few days were a blur of numb shock for Mother, but for me, they were a crucible. The pain of betrayal, from my father and my best friend Isabel, fused into a single potent fuel. I thought about Isabel's smug, pregnant smirk. I thought about my father's icy pronouncement. They had underestimated us. They had underestimated me. My first move was quiet, subtle, and entirely untraceable. I wasn't just a socialite. I had spent years observing my father, soaking in the ruthless strategies of the corporate world from the periphery. I knew the vulnerabilities of Sterling Enterprises. Every large corporation has them. Whispers of impending regulatory changes, anxieties about market shifts, whispers of executive infighting, the nervous hum of a changing guard. I began subtly leaking damaging rumors about Sterling Enterprises' unstable leadership to the press. Not direct accusations, not outright falsehoods, but strategically placed tidbits, carefully timed anonymous tips to financial bloggers and less scrupulous online news sources. I targeted specific vulnerabilities. I knew Richard had been pushing aggressive expansion into volatile overseas markets, over-leveraging the company. I suggested that this expansion was facing unexpected hurdles. I hinted at internal dissent among the board members regarding his increasingly autocratic leadership style. I speculated about the long-term impact of a sudden, unexpected change in the CEO's marital status on investor confidence. It was a slow burn at first. A murmur here, a minor blip there. Then a reputable financial news site picked up on the uncertainty surrounding Sterling Enterprises' future strategic direction. The stock, initially stable, began to dip. A few cents at first, then more. Simultaneously, I began to act on another front. I had a modest personal inheritance from my grandmother, a small trust fund untouched by my father's immediate freeze. It wasn't much in the grand scheme of Sterling's billions, but it was enough to start. I leveraged my network of socialite contacts, the daughters and sons of other wealthy families, many of whom secretly resented their own father's control. I spoke in veiled terms about undervalued assets and market corrections. I started aggressively buying up distressed company stock. Every dip was an opportunity. Every nervous headline was a chance to acquire more. It was a painstaking, methodical process, requiring constant monitoring of the market, but the satisfaction of watching those numbers tick up in my portfolio, even by tiny increments, was immense. What I didn't know then, what was happening in the background, was an entirely different, equally powerful force aligning against Richard. Unbeknownst to me, my mother, Eleanor, was far more than an elegant matriarch. In her youth, before her marriage to Richard, she had been a shrewd businesswoman in her own right, poised to take over her family's rival textile empire before she chose love over power. She had connections, loyalties forged in the trenches of the corporate world, men and women who remembered her sharp mind and her innate sense of fairness, a stark contrast to Richard's cold ambition. From the quiet sanctuary of our hotel suite, while I was orchestrating my public whisper campaign, Eleanor was making discreet, untraceable phone calls. She wasn't targeting the press. She was contacting loyal, disgruntled veteran employees of Sterling Enterprises, senior vice presidents, longtime department heads, even a few board members who felt sidelined by Richard's iron grip. These were the people who had seen Richard rise, who had witnessed his ruthless tactics firsthand, and who privately harbored resentments about his recent decisions, particularly his disregard for company loyalty. "Henry, it's Eleanor," I overheard her whisper one evening, her voice low, conspiratorial. "Are you still with Richard? Or are you ready to remember who truly built this company?" She was forming a clandestine alliance against Richard. She spoke of his recent risky ventures, of his escalating arrogance, of his blatant disregard for protocol in his personal life impacting the company's image. She subtly reminded them of Richard's early days, when he was just an ambitious, penniless employee marrying into wealth, and how he had systematically pushed out those who had once supported him. Her quiet charm, combined with her razor-sharp intellect, was proving to be a potent weapon. The market, meanwhile, continued its nervous dance. News segments began to feature Sterling Enterprises more prominently, not for its innovations, but for its unusual volatility. Analysts murmured about instability at the top. The phrase, unstable leadership, became a recurring motif. I watched the stock price plummet, a grim satisfaction blooming in my chest. Each drop was a testament to the effectiveness of my subtle sabotage. Simultaneously, the numbers in my brokerage account grew, slowly but steadily, as I acquired more and more of the distressed company stock. I felt a surge of raw power, a feeling far more intoxicating than any designer dress or exclusive party. This wasn't inherited power. This was earned. One afternoon, as I was tracking the latest drop in Sterling stock, Eleanor walked into the room, a cryptic smile playing on her lips. "Chloe," she said, her voice unusually vibrant, "I've been busy too. It seems Richard's recent indiscretions haven't gone unnoticed by certain long-standing colleagues. Some rather influential ones." My eyes met hers. A silent understanding passed between us. We were two different generations, two different battlefronts, but we were fighting the same war. Richard had thought he could discard us, leaving us to wither. He had forgotten the strength, the cunning, and the sheer audacity of the women he had wronged. The chaos I had sown in the market was now meeting the quiet, simmering resentment Eleanor had cultivated within the very heart of Sterling Enterprises. The ground beneath Richard Sterling was beginning to crumble. He had no idea the earthquake that was coming. The chaos at Sterling Enterprises was a symphony to my ears. The stock's freefall, fueled by my strategically leaked rumors, had ignited a full-blown panic. Financial news channels blared headlines about corporate instability and leadership concerns. Analysts, once fawning over Richard's aggressive strategies, now openly questioned his judgment. The growing whispers of corporate instability created chaos within Sterling Enterprises, a tremor that quickly escalated into an earthquake. This was my moment. I had spent weeks leveraging every contact, every last dime of my grandmother's inheritance, and every subtle market dip to buy up Sterling stock. It was a painstaking process, but watching my percentage ownership inch upwards, while Richard's empire outwardly crumbled, was intoxicating. I was no longer just the socialite heiress. I was a significant shareholder, a genuine player in the game my father thought only he could master. The time was ripe. Through my network, I discreetly reached out to the most powerful dissident board members. These were the men and women who had long chafed under Richard's autocratic rule, but had lacked the leverage or the courage to challenge him. Now, with the company's value plummeting and their own reputations at stake, they were desperate for a solution. My phone calls were precise, cutting straight to the point. Richard Sterling is a liability. I have a plan. The plan was simple, yet audacious. I revealed my hand, outlining my substantial stock acquisitions and the growing unease among investors. I presented a clear path forward, a vision of stabilizing the company by removing its unstable core. Richard. They listened, their initial skepticism giving way to a dawning realization that I, Chloe, the privileged socialite, was not to be underestimated. But what I didn't fully grasp then was the full extent of Eleanor's hidden network of loyal executives. While I was playing the public market, my mother, with quiet, surgical precision, was operating in the shadows, deep within the very veins of Sterling Enterprises. She wasn't just pulling strings, she was meticulously weaving a net to ensnare Richard. "Chloe," she'd said during one of our hushed calls, "Richard has always been reckless. Over the years he's made promises he hasn't kept, cut corners he shouldn't have, and alienated loyal people who know where the bodies are buried. And those loyal people were now her instruments. a senior vice president in global operations, a veteran human resources director, the longtime head of internal audit, men and women who remembered Eleanor's quiet influence and fairness. They hadn't trusted Richard with their careers, and they certainly didn't trust him with the company's future. Simultaneously, Eleanor's hidden network of loyal executives launched their own attack, exposing Richard's questionable business practices and disregard for employee welfare. They leaked internal memos outlining suspicious budget allocations, provided anonymous testimonies about his tyrannical management style, and hinted at potential compliance issues in his overseas ventures. The internal pressure escalated. Employees, emboldened by the chaos and the whispers of a rebellion, started speaking up. Morale plummeted, and whispers of a mass exodus reached the board. Richard, caught between the falling stock and the internal mutiny, was spiraling. He barked orders, threatened dismissals, but his usual authority was gone, replaced by a desperate, flailing rage. The board, facing an undeniable internal and external rebellion, had no choice. They convened an emergency meeting. The sheer speed of it was dizzying. I received the formal invitation via encrypted email marked Urgent Board Review. It was happening. The meeting took place in the opulent, wood-paneled boardroom on the top floor of the Sterling Tower, the same room where Richard had, for decades, commanded his empire. Now it was his judgment hall. I walked in, not as Chloe, the scorned daughter, but as Chloe Sterling, a major shareholder, accompanied by a seasoned corporate lawyer I had retained. My mother, Eleanor, wasn't physically present, but her influence permeated the room, an invisible, potent force. I took my seat at the long table, meeting the wary glances of the other board members. Richard was already there, his face ashen, his eyes narrowed, burning with a furious, trapped animal look. Isabel, conspicuously absent, was clearly deemed too much of a liability for this highly sensitive meeting. The atmosphere was thick with tension, each board member aware of the high stakes. The chairman, a stoic man named Mr. Harrington, cleared his throat. "Richard," he began, his voice grave, "we are here to address the unprecedented instability within Sterling Enterprises, the market reaction, the internal unrest, and the revelations from various departments have made your position untenable." Richard erupted. "Untenable? I built this company. This is a coup. This is Chloe. This is Eleanor. This is a calculated attack." He pounded his fist on the table, his face red with rage. "You can't do this. I am Sterling Enterprises." "On the contrary, Richard," Mr. Harrington said, his voice steel, "no single individual is Sterling Enterprises. The board, acting on behalf of the shareholders and the company's best interests, holds the ultimate authority." He then laid out the accusations: the plummeting stock, the exposure of risky ventures, the documented incidents of employee harassment, the blatant disregard for corporate governance. Each point was delivered with the precision of a prosecutor. I spoke calmly, presenting the detailed analysis of how Richard's recent decisions had directly contributed to the company's decline. I highlighted the erosion of investor confidence, the risk of class action lawsuits from disgruntled employees, and the potential for a hostile takeover if the instability continued. My voice was steady, my arguments irrefutable, backed by data and the raw facts of the company's plummeting value. Then came the surprise element, orchestrated by my mother. Mr. Davis, the head of internal audit, a man known for his meticulous integrity and fierce loyalty to Eleanor from their early days, stood up. "Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, there is one more matter that needs to be brought to the board's attention." He then proceeded to reveal a series of highly questionable offshore accounts and undocumented transactions personally authorized by Richard. Not outright illegal, perhaps, but certainly ethically dubious and designed to enrich himself at the company's expense. The details were damning, a final, lethal blow to Richard's already crippled credibility. Richard's face drained of all color. He looked like a man watching his world crumble brick by brick. He tried to interrupt, to deny, but his voice was drowned out by the shocked murmurs of the other board members. The vote was swift and unanimous. They voted to oust Richard from his CEO position. The gavel, the symbol of final authority, struck the table with a resonant thud. Richard Sterling, your tenure as CEO of Sterling Enterprises is terminated, effective immediately. Richard lunged forward, but security, anticipating his reaction, swiftly moved to block him. "You can't do this!" he roared, his voice hoarse, his face contorted with fury. "I'll sue! I'll take all of you down!" "Mr. Sterling," Mr. Harrington said calmly, "your shares, given your breaches of fiduciary duty and the terms of your original employment contract, are hereby forfeited to the company. You have nothing left to sue with." The words hit him like a physical blow, stripped him of his shares, his empire, his wealth, his identity, all gone. He stared, utterly broken, at the room full of faces that now regarded him with cold disdain. Then came the next shockwave. Mr. Harrington turned to me. "Chloe Sterling, given your proven acumen, your substantial investment in the company, and your strategic vision, the board has voted to appoint you to a powerful executive role, effective immediately as the interim COO, with a clear path to CEO once the company stabilizes." A collective gasp. Interim COO. My eyes widened. I had hoped for a board seat, maybe a significant director role, but this was beyond my wildest dreams. I knew then that Eleanor was pulling strings from behind the scenes, her quiet network of loyalists ensuring that I not only got a seat at the table, but a commanding position. I stood, my gaze steady, meeting the eyes of the board members. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman, I accept." My voice, though calm, vibrated with a newfound power. This wasn't a given inheritance, this was earned, this was a reclamation. Richard, a shattered man, was escorted out by security, his empire crumbling behind him. I watched him go, a profound sense of justice washing over me. The coup was complete. The tables had turned, and the true reign of Sterling Enterprises was about to begin. The CEO's office, once a fortress of my father's autocratic rule, now felt like a bastion of newfound purpose. The panoramic views of the Manhattan skyline, once a symbol of Richard's dominion, now represented the vast horizons of Sterling Enterprises under my and mother's guidance. Chloe and Eleanor, now major shareholders, solidified their control over Sterling Enterprises, systematically dismantling the remnants of Richard's chaotic reign and steering the company back to prosperity. My days were a blur of strategic meetings, investor calls, and internal restructuring. I immersed myself in every facet of the business, proving that my understanding of the conglomerate went far beyond a mere birthright. I learned from every challenge, every decision. The initial shock of betrayal had given way to an exhilarating clarity. Chloe, having learned that true power stems from resilience, strategy, and loyalty, not just birthright, approached every problem with a shrewdness that surprised even the seasoned board members who had once underestimated me. Mother, ever the silent architect, worked tirelessly behind the scenes. Her network of loyal executives became my most trusted advisors, their long-standing knowledge of the company invaluable. She leveraged her social connections, not for parties, but to rebuild Sterling's tarnished reputation, emphasizing our new commitment to ethical practices and transparent leadership. Together, we were a formidable force, a testament to what a mother and daughter, united by a shared purpose, could achieve. The company, once synonymous with my father's cold ambition, began to transform. We divested from Richard's riskiest overseas ventures, focusing on sustainable growth and ethical sourcing. We invested heavily in employee welfare programs, fostering a culture of loyalty and respect that Richard had systematically destroyed. I initiated mentorship programs for young talent, especially women, ensuring that competence and hard work, not gender or family connections, were the true pathways to success. I was committed to transforming Sterling Enterprises into a more ethical and family-oriented corporation, a legacy truly worth inheriting. News of Sterling's resurgence spread. The stock price, once in freefall, steadily climbed, not just recovering, but surpassing its previous peaks. Investors returned, drawn by the company's newfound stability and our progressive vision. It was a triumph built on integrity, a direct repudiation of Richard's avarice, and then came the ultimate poetic sting. News travels fast in the circles my father once commanded. We heard the whispers first, then saw the confirmations in the discreet gossip columns. Richard Sterling, disgraced and impoverished, was forced to live in obscurity with Isabel. His once lavish lifestyle was gone, replaced by a quiet, meager existence, sustained only by a small, court-ordered allowance, a fraction of what he had forfeited. He was a cautionary tale, a faded shadow of his former self. The sting, however, wasn't just for him, it was for Isabel. After giving birth to a son, the male heir Richard had so cruelly sought, Isabel, in a move that mirrored his own betrayal, inexplicably left Richard for a wealthier, more influential man. She had used Richard to gain status and a child, and once his power evaporated, she discarded him just as callously as he had discarded my mother. The irony was brutal, a perfect reflection of his own heartless actions. The legacy he had so desperately sought, the son for whom he had destroyed his family, became the very instrument of his final, most profound abandonment. He was left alone, with nothing but the echoes of his past choices. I felt no joy in their misfortune, only a quiet sense of karmic balance. Their suffering wasn't our victory. Our victory was in the flourishing of Sterling Enterprises, in the renewed dignity of my mother, and in my own growth into a leader I was proud to be. Mother, though she never sought public recognition, finally allowed herself a quiet contentment. She saw her years of sacrifice validated not by a piece of paper or a title, but by the tangible transformation of the company and the woman I had become. Our bond, once tested by unimaginable betrayal, had forged into something unbreakable, purer than any bloodline. We had reclaimed what was rightfully ours, not just the company, but our self-worth, our dignity, and our future. Our story became a beacon, a powerful narrative whispered in boardrooms and across dinner tables. It echoed a profound truth. Betrayal can forge unbreakable bonds, and true legacy is built not on gender or inherited wealth, but on intellect, loyalty, and the fierce courage to reclaim what is rightfully yours. It taught me that genuine power lies not in controlling others, but in mastering oneself. Not in inherited privilege, but in earned respect. Not in superficial appearances, but in profound character. The perfect facade of my old life had cracked, only to reveal the true strength of the foundation beneath. And so, the saga of Chloe Sterling concludes. Her journey, born from betrayal, blossomed into a testament to resilience, strategy, and the enduring power of a mother-daughter bond. It reminds us that even when stripped of everything, true worth and a formidable legacy can be built on the unwavering foundations of intellect and loyalty. If Chloe's story resonated with you, if her fight for justice inspired you to consider what true power looks like, please consider liking this story, subscribing for more narratives that explore complex family dynamics and remarkable personal growth, and commenting below with your thoughts and reflections. Your insights are incredibly valuable to us, and we truly appreciate you joining us on this powerful journey. Thank you for reading, and we hope to connect with you again soon.